Identity Information Confirmation Bill, first reading.
The Honourable Nathan Guy.
Mr Speaker, I move that the Identity Information Confirmation Bill be now read a first time. At the appropriate time, I intend to move that the bill will be referred to the Government Administration Committee. Mr Speaker, the Identity Information Confirmation Bill makes the data validation service available not only to the public sector, but also, importantly, to the private sector. The service is a new tool in the fight against identity fraud. In particular, the service will combat the creation of fictitious identities as well as tombstone fraud and the name change fraud. The service is a web-based system run by the Department of Internal Affairs. It allows agencies to check whether the identity information presented to them is consistent with that held by the Department. There are three sources of information the service can check: the citizenship registers, the passports database, and the various registers of birth, deaths and marriages registry office. Let me give an example of how the service will work. Let's pick a name. Lindsay is a new customer for a bank, and the bank needs to be certain of who Lindsay is. The bank asks for Lindsay's details and asks Lindsay whether he consents to having a confirmation check made on these details. Lindsay consents to this check. The bank employee enters Lindsay's information into the service website, and the service responds that Lindsay's information is consistent with the department's database. The bank now knows that Lindsay is not using a fictitious identity. This knowledge, together with other processes the bank considers necessary, gives the bank confidence that the person being dealt with is actually Lindsay. Alternatively, the service returns a message that the information that Lindsay provided is not consistent with the department's databases. It could be that Lindsay has adopted a different surname through marriage from that on his birth record, or it could be that someone is trying to conduct identity fraud using Lindsay's name. The service can also provide an exception message in response to a search when a death or name change has been recorded against Lindsay's birth record. The only other information that may be provided where there is an exception message relates to the validity of the identity documents. Validity. For instance, when a passport presented by a customer has been reported as stolen, all of these exception results target specific identity fraud methods and provide agencies using the service with an alert to a risk of fraud. I'd now like to just take a couple of moments to talk about the substance of the Identity Information Confirmation Bill. The bill will make the service available to the private sector and more widely available within the public sector. Organisations wishing to use the service will have to demonstrate a genuine need to use it. They will also have to demonstrate that they have appropriate security and privacy procedures in place. Under the bill, organisations will need to seek the consent of the individual concerned before checking information. The bill provides that the agency must maintain another process for dealing with a person who does not consent to the check being made. This is to prevent people being forced to consent through the withholding of access to a product or service. It also ensures that a person retains control over what happens with his or her information and is aware of how his or her information is being used. The bill establishes that organisations using the service will have to enter into an agreement with the appropriate statutory officer from the Department of Internal Affairs. The bill provides for the creation of a generic agreement so that its terms and conditions can be used as a template for agreements between the Department and multiple organisations. The Privacy Commissioner will be consulted in the development of any generic agreement, as well as any agreement between the Department and an agency using the service which does not use that template. Furthermore, Mr Speaker, the Privacy Commissioner will also be able to order regular reviews of the agreements as she thinks necessary. The bill also protects privacy in a number of other ways. The Privacy Commissioner will have the power to require the Department to provide reports to her on the operation of the service, such as the statistics on how many people present information that is inconsistent with records of the Department. And I've already mentioned that the organisations that want to use the service will need to show that they have genuine need for the service and have appropriate security and privacy practices. The organisations that enter into agreements to use the service will also be listed on the Department's website. Finally, Mr Speaker, I want to give the House of another example where the data validation would have been useful to fight identity fraud and save the taxpayer money. If we refer back to September 2006, the government was alerted by Kiwibank to some suspicious activity that was occurring across a number of bank accounts which were receiving deposits for the pension. On investigation, it became apparent that the government was giving $56,000 each fortnight to 123 false identities which had been created by Mr Wayne Patterson. Mr Wayne Patterson operated by creating false birth certificates. He took these into various work and income offices throughout the country, and his operation was solely reliant on the fact that there were at that time no routine checks to ensure that these birth certificates had real information on them. Mr Patterson is now partway through an 8-year sentence in prison. Overall, the government was defrauded $3.4 million by Mr Patterson's scheme. However, it is likely that Mr Patterson would never have received a single cent from the government by these fraudulent means if this service had been available and had been used by work and income banks and other organisations.
I'm sorry to interrupt the honourable member, but the time has come for me to leave the chair. This debate is interrupted and set down for resumption next sitting day. The House stands adjourned until 2 p.m. tomorrow.